So in search of its own identity, whether it's a boy or a girl, it doesn't matter. So what I have designed is a fun session. It is a long session, so it can't be boring. And so we will have fun session. 45 minutes I will tell the story. It takes about 30 to 45 minutes. And now keep listening to some of the elements of the story carefully, because you will realize what to focus on. So please make notes. And then I will ask you to complete the story. And then I will ask you to tell me the story, which I will analyze and interpret in terms of a framework of 8 dimensions. Because my understanding is, as a national level, that the education is going to change dramatically. It has already changed dramatically, but it is going to further change, which means most of the faculty, most of the students will have to undergo transformation. Their thinking has to change, their ways of working, ways of learning has to change. So we are looking at, when we look at the stories, we are looking at what are the places or what are the spaces in which change has to occur, and what kind of change has to occur. So that is what we are looking at. Now I have 3 things left rankling in my mind since morning, whatever conversation I listened to. And since I was told I've already had 2 times, so I did not ask any more questions. But I will share it here. One is the difficulty with us Indian is that our mind is so colonized or colonialized that we don't even discover that it is colonial. There are little things in which we are colonialized. Our thinking has become colonial, which does not give us the freedom to innovate, to accept that we can design concepts, that we can design theories, and we can design frameworks which the West can also have a look at it, and which would be meaningful and relevant to them. So I think faculty in specific and institutions in general must recognize that when they discuss future of education or the implementation of NEP, it must keep in mind that the colonialism doesn't seep in or creep into the thinking. Otherwise it keeps on coming, and I can see it rampantly available every place. Whether it is the IIM, I got so disgusted at IIM with the kind of teaching and the kind of discussions which were happening, that this whole flame thing came about. Otherwise it would not have come about, because I was teaching, my courses were quite different and they were criticized heavily, they were controversy, it created immense amount of controversies and immense amount of criticism, but I stuck on. I said, you don't like it, you don't like it, that's your problem, it's not my problem. I'm doing something which is I find meaningful and relevant, and the students find it meaningful and relevant. Because out of the 160 students, 136 students used to register for my course. So it meant that they found it meaningful and relevant. So I did not care what the director thought or what the faculty thought or what kind of guspus they did behind my back. It didn't bother me one damn bit. So if it is important to the students, then it is important teaching material or whatever I was teaching. So some of the things I did was one of them was a lab for personal growth. First it was called interpersonal relations, which was acceptable. Then it was called personal growth lab. Then there was a controversy. Then it was called explorations in life, roles and identity. It became a blown up, what is this identity bit you are bringing in management? But that course was very most popular. And when I was the alumni chairman, and we used to have the alumni reunion, the whole class was divided between who had taken ELRI and who had not taken ELRI. And there was a distinct difference in their life, in their careers, in their relationships in the marriage, in the relationships with the children. And one of the students, Windy Banga, who is supposed to, I think all of you will know, he was the chairman of Hindustan Levers, then he went to England. He came to our convocation at Flame and he publicly said that my marriage has survived because of my wife who had taken the ELRI course. So it makes a difference, so whether people like it or people don't like it, it doesn't matter to me. As long as it impacts my students' lives in a positive way, it is important to me. So I will start telling you a story about four princes. How does the story begin?
Once upon a time.
So I shall begin like that. Once upon a time, far, far from here, but just around the corner, and long, long time ago, but just about yesterday, was a kingdom. This kingdom had a king, like all kingdoms, this kingdom had a king and a queen, and a whole lot of people who lived in that kingdom. People of the kingdom were very, very happy and very pleased with the king because the king was kind and generous, just and fair, and the queen was generous and very kind to the people of the kingdom. And so people lived happily, but after a while the people started grumbling and mumbling. What is going to happen? The king and the queen don't have a child. So what is going to happen to the kingdom? So there was a lot of murmurs around, so people held prayers. The king and the queen visited the temples and did prayers and wished for an heir to happen so that the kingdom would continue. After a while, it was as if the gods had heard their prayers, and one after the other, they had four male children, four princes. When the first child was born, there was a grand celebration. People were very happy. There were dhol, baja, nagara, vagere, vagere over the kingdom. And people celebrated with sheer gusto, and now they will have an heir. And they all hoped it would be a male child, so they would have another king who would be looking after them. And when the child was born, he was a male child, the sages of the kingdom came to bless the child. They gave the child two gifts. One was a book of knowledge, and the sages said, this book is for the people of the kingdom. If the child opened the book, the answer, or any question to any dilemma, the answer would be written there. He would find it. And so that would be the role in the kingdom, to take this book of knowledge and go to the people, and the people would ask him questions of their problems and their dilemmas of life, and the prince could open the book and tell them the answers. The second gift they gave him was a doll with a frozen smile on her face. So the queen took the gifts, wrapped it in a silk wrapper, put it in a kind of a bag, and put it in the cupboard. As the sages said, a time would come when these two gifts should be given to the prince, and he would go out into the kingdom to do his role. So the child started growing, and after some time, the second prince was born. And again there was happiness in the kingdom, for the people of the kingdom said, now we have a king, and now we have a commander-in-chief, because the second one would look after the army and keep our kingdom safe. So the sages of the kingdom came and gave him two gifts. One was a magic sword. The magic sword, they said, would kill or destroy all evil in the kingdom. And the second gift they gave him was a personal gift, was a roaring mouse. Now, about the roaring mouse and about the doll, I will speak a little bit later. And the queen wrapped up the gifts in a silken fabric, put it in a silken bag, and put it in the child's cupboard, saying, when the child comes of age, I will give the gifts to him. Sometime later, a third child, a third prince, was born to the king and the queen. Now, this child was, and the sages of the kingdom came to give the gifts as they had given the other gifts. And of course, people in the kingdom were exceedingly happy because now they have multiple possibilities of not being abandoned and not being orphaned without an heir. So now they had the third prince. The sages of the kingdom came and gave the child two gifts. One was a gift for the public, which was a magic box of lotions, potions, and solutions. They said, any disease, any illness, anybody in the kingdom have, this child will be able to cure it with this box of magic box of lotions, potions, and solutions. And the second gift they gave him was a tear bag. About the tear bag, I will come a little bit later. After some time, the fourth child, the fourth prince, was born, and there was grand celebrations in the kingdom because they said, now we have plenty, now there is nothing, we have no scarcity, we have an opportunity of plenty. 4 sons to the king and the queen, and 4 people to look after our kingdom. The sages of the kingdom came and gave two gifts to this child. One, they gave him a cap of invisibility, a magic cap of invisibility. They said whenever the child would put the cap on, he would become invisible. When he would take it out, he would become visible. And the second gift they gave him was a stick which kept beating him. And about this stick, I will come a little bit later. Now, all the 4 children started to grow up in the kingdom, and then came a time when they had to start going out into the kingdom. So when the eldest child, it was time for him to go and meet the people of the kingdom. Now, this child had grown into a very quiet, very sober, very intellectual kind of a person. He would be constantly reading books, he would be constantly studying, he would be sitting in a corner and thinking and looking at the skies and imagining all kinds of things. And he took his book of knowledge and got onto his horse and went to the kingdom, and people came and said, "Oh prince, this is our problem, this is our dilemma, this is what we don't know what to do, this is what we don't know." The prince would get down from his horse, sit on a cut tree, and then open a book, and the answer would be there. Now, very slowly the word spread around that this prince has all the solutions to all the problems anybody has. So he was starting to be called the wise prince. He was the eldest prince, he started to be called the wise prince. And then when he would come back to his palace apartment, he would pick up the doll and start crying. He would pick up the doll and tell the doll all the problems he had heard, and weep and weep and weep, and finally fall unconscious and go to sleep. And the doll would have her smiling face at him, but nothing moved. But the prince would hold the doll and cry for quite a bit. Now, then came the time for the second prince to go out. Now, our second prince was a glam prince. He was like a rock star. He would come down from his palace apartment dressed in all fineries, medals, this, that, decorate himself with all the things he had won or not won, and start climbing the steps down, and the horse would be waiting. He would get onto the horse and start going to the kingdom, twirling his sword, saying anybody who is an evil, this sword will kill him. And he would be, people were afraid of him but felt also very secure that the king, this child would protect us and we would be able to sleep in peace. And all the things which was evil in the kingdom was destroyed by him. And when he would come back into his palace apartments after a day's deeds, he would enter his apartment and a mouse would roar and jump at him. And the prince would fall unconscious in his bed and go to sleep until the next morning. So, but very soon the people started calling him, he is our warrior prince. He would become the commander-in-chief. Our first prince would become the king, the heir apparent. The second would become the commander-in-chief. Now we come to our third prince. The third prince was a very strange prince. He was sober, he was quiet, he was silent, he would not talk to anybody, he would not relate to anybody. He was constantly had a sad look on his face. And when he would come down from his palace apartments, he would come down one at a time, unlike his second brother who would jump 3-4 steps together. And he would be wearing a white flowing gown, and he was kind of, everybody would feel, watch him and feel, Arey Baba, isko kya ho gaya? He would get onto his horse and go, and people would come and say, my father is sick. So he would get down from his horse, sit on the cut tree which would be around, and open his box of magic lotions, potions, and solutions, and offer them something, and the parent would be cured. The child who had fallen would be cured. The person who had fallen down from his horse would be cured. Any illness, any disease, the person would be cured. He came to be known as our healer prince. So people started calling him our healer prince. They said, now we have a king, heir apparent. We have a warrior prince who would protect the boundaries of the kingdom. We have a healer prince who would cure all our illnesses. And then they said, now let us see what our fourth prince would be like. When the fourth prince came out of the apartment and started going to the public, he would wear his invisible cap and tease people. He would pull somebody's leg and nobody would know who was doing it. He was doing all kinds of pranks and putting on his cap and removing his cap and making making people laugh. After a while, he came to be known as the Joker Prince. And when he would come back home in the evening, you know that stick I had talked to you about, the stick would come out of the bag and start beating him and beating him. And he would say, oh, never again, and fall asleep to start the next day all over with the same thing. So now these are our four princes, and who had these 2 gifts each, and they were doing what they were doing in the kingdom. So one was a warrior wise prince, the second was a warrior prince, third was a healer prince, and fourth was a joker prince. Then one day the sages of the kingdom came to the king and said, O king, the stars have configured in a certain manner, so your eldest child must go out of the kingdom for 2 years. He has to discover who he is and come back but he has to get out for 2 years. Of course, the king was very sad, but the law is the law of the land is law of the land, so the prince must go. When this spread like a wildfire in the kingdom, he says, oh my God, now who shall we go to solve our problems? But they also shook their heads and said, law is the law of the land is law of the land, so the prince must go. So on the appointed day, the prince got down from came out of his apartment, got onto the horse, and all of a sudden remembered that today was the day he had to leave the kingdom. So he ran back to the apartment, picked up the doll, hid it under his cloak, got onto the horse and started moving towards the eastern boundary of the kingdom. Whole day along the, and there was another law. Another law was if the prince did not leave the boundary of the kingdom before sundown, he would be beheaded. So 5 soldiers were following after him and praying all the time, God, God, we don't have to do that. And as the prince went, people came, oh prince, last time solve our problems. And the prince would get down off the horse and solve the problems. Open the book and solve the problem. And the soldiers were getting worried that he might not reach the edge of the kingdom by sundown. But the prince reached the boundary of the kingdom few minutes before sundown. And before the boundary was a roaring, raging river. And there were dead bodies in the river, there were carcasses of animals, trees floating, and the prince did not know what to do. He opened his book, and lo and behold, there was nothing in the book, it was blank. He threw down the book, he looked at it from the back side, he looked at it from the front side, but there was not a single word written in the book. So he ran on to the one side to see if there was a bridge, he ran to the other side to see whether there was a boat, but nothing was there. So he just did not know what to do. The sun was setting, it was just about half of it had gone down into the water. The prince did not know what to do, and he stood at the edge of the water, and the soldiers were just behind him with their swords out, because that was what they had to do. And we leave our first prince standing by the water, by the edge of the water, the soldiers behind him, and we come back to the kingdom. In the kingdom, after a while, the sages came to the king and said, "O king, the stars have configured in a certain manner, and your second prince must go now out of the kingdom. That is the law of the land." So the king said, "The first hasn't returned." They said, "That is not their concern. Their concern is that the second prince had to go." So on the appointed day, the prince dressed up all in his finery and took his sword and got down and remembered that this is the day he is leaving the kingdom. So he ran up the steps, brought his mouse, put it under his cloak, and started going. Along the road, the whole road was filled with people wishing him goodbye, and the young girls were standing in their balconies, screaming at him, "Oh prince, come back, we will wait for you, don't marry anybody from outside, we are waiting for you, so please come back and marry somebody from the kingdom and not outside." By the dusk fell, he reached the western boundary of the kingdom. Now, as he was sitting on the horse and contemplating what to do, the soldiers were coming, and as the 5 horses started to come near, the horse on which the prince was sitting got quite frightened. So he made a big jump. And as he made the jump, the prince fell into the deep, dark forest which was ahead of him. And he fell into the forest side of the kingdom, forest side of the land, and not the boundary of the kingdom. So the soldiers came and looked that not even his little finger was still touching the boundary, and went back to the kingdom to report to the king that the second son had left. And he had crossed the boundary. Time went by, it was time for the third prince. The sages of the kingdom said, "O king, your third prince must go because the stars have configured in a certain manner, and it spells a lot of omen and auspiciousness. The third prince must leave the kingdom." The king said, "The first has gone, not returned, the second has gone, not returned, now the third has to go. But the law of the land is law of the land, so go he must." So the day came when this third prince, like usual, came out of his apartment with his head down, not looking right, not looking left, just looking down with his white flowing gown. And with a sad face, as he was coming down, this is box of magic lotions, potions and solutions, he discovered that it is his day to go. So he went back to his apartment and picked up the tear bag, hid it under his cloak, and got onto the horse and went to the northern boundary and started moving towards the northern boundary of the kingdom. All along the way, people said, "Oh, Prince, please heal this, heal that. Now we don't know how we will manage. Our parents are sick. Please give us some medicines. Please do this, please do that." He addressed it to everybody and reached the northern boundary of the kingdom. The northern boundary of the kingdom lay in front of him a huge glacier and not a track to follow. And it was getting dark, it was chilly, the snow was starting to fall, and he was afraid. Then all of a sudden he heard some moaning, groaning sounds from somewhere in the glacier. And so he kicked the horse and said, "You go to this sound." And they discovered there was a very narrow trek on the glacier which the horse followed. And we leave the prince going into the glacier where the sound of moaning and groaning were coming. The soldiers went back and said to the king that the third prince has also left the boundary of the kingdom. Now, few days or little time later, it was the fourth time for the fourth son to leave. The sages of the kingdom came and told the king, "Oh king, it is now time for your youngest child to leave." The king said, "The first hasn't returned, the second hasn't returned, the third hasn't returned." And the sages said, "That's not for us to say, but the fourth prince must go. That is the law of the land." So the fourth prince, like in his merry way, pulling somebody's plates, tickling somebody from behind, pulling somebody's beard, came down the steps to take the road. And he forgot that and he remembered this is his last day and he is going out of the kingdom. So went back and brought that stick with him, hid it under his coat, and started going towards the southern boundary of the kingdom. He traveled all day and people said, "Oh, Prince, make us laugh. Who will make us laugh? We could bear all the diseases and the illness and the problems because you made us laugh. So please make us laugh at the last time." So the prince did all the pranks and went ahead on his journey. While the dusk was falling, he came to the southern boundary of the kingdom. In front of him was a huge, massive rock with no steps, no things to go. He wondered what to do. How the hell will he cross this rock? There are no footsteps, there is no opening. But as the sun was setting, and first he decided he will wear his cap and be invisible and not move out of the kingdom. Who will know that he has not gone? Because he will remain completely invisible to everybody. But then he said, "No, my first brother is gone, my second brother is gone, my third brother is gone, so I must go too. I must also discover what it is beyond this land." So as he was standing there contemplating, and the sun was kind of falling, he saw a slight crack in the wall, huge stone, and he said, "This must now, as the sun will go on the other side, the crack will open, and I have to take that chance." And sure enough, as the sun was setting, the crack opened that much with the horse and he could go. So with his horse, he just ran into the hole which had opened up, and then the hole closed behind him. So we leave our fourth prince there, and the guards of the kingdom went back to the king and said, "Sir, your youngest child also has left the kingdom and crossed the boundary. He is not in the kingdom." So that is where we have left our 4 prints. Now comes your task. Which prince do you identify the most? The wise prince, the warrior prince, the healer prince, or the joker prince? The wise prince has a book of knowledge and a doll with a smiling face. The warrior prince has a magic sword who could destroy evil and a roaring mouse. The healer prince has a box of magic lotions, potions, and solutions and a tear bag. And the joker prince has an invisible cap and a stick which beats him up. Which one do you identify the most? Yes. Third one, then I think, okay, so this is the third prince. Who else? First one, wise prince. The wise prince can stay there. The healer prince can stay here. How about the others? How is it so difficult? That is a fourth one. This is the fourth prince table. How about you? Second prince, I think you take another table there. Second prince can go there. This is the third prince, that is the second prince, this is the first prince, this is the fourth prince. Where we left the prince, in the spot where we left him, and you have to write it in the first person. I, the prince, you can give yourself a name because I haven't given a name to the prince. You can give yourself a name and write a story as Bollywood juicy, as Bollywood exciting, with dance, music, dialogue, anything. Complete freedom to do what you want with the story. So what is the time now?
3:10. 10 past 3.
वहाँ आसपास कोई पेड़ है, अगर पेड़ है तो क्या उसको काटने के लिए भी कोई चीज़ जिससे वो खुद नाव बना सके और उस समस्या भरी नदी को पार कर सके, एक सोल्यूशन। अब उसको आउट ऑफ द बॉक्स थिंकिंग करनी है। उसके पास रेडीमेड सॉल्यूशन की किताब खत्म है, कोई ब्रिज भी नहीं है, कोई नाव भी नहीं है, तो अब या तो उसे नाव बनानी है या उन डेड बॉडीज क्योंकि जो ऊपर फ्लोट कर रही हैं, क्या उन्हीं को वो बांध के उसके ऊपर चढ़ के, और वो जितना हम्बल है वो ये चीज़ नहीं कर पाएगा। लेकिन अगर आपको राजा बनना है तो आपको कभी कभी टफ कॉल लेने पड़ते हैं। आप सिर्फ ढीले बनकर नहीं बैठ सकते, आपको सब कुछ करना पड़ेगा। तो दूसरा सोल्यूशन पेड़ नहीं मिला तो बॉडीज़ को भी नाव बना के क्रॉस करना चाहिए।
वो यार ये ना अभी मैंने ना वेरी फ्रैंकली अभी मैंने एक
पढ़ी है?
नहीं पढ़ी नहीं, मैं वो देख रहा था। तो उसमें एक टीम का वो एपिसोड है जिसके अंदर वो जंगल में जाते हैं कहीं पे, जिसमें जो राक्षस होते हैं ना, हिडिम्बा, तो वो बिल्कुल ऐसे ही बना।
हाँ तो बोल देते हैं ना कि जब वो जंगल में गिरा तो लेट्स नॉट बेहोश है ना, ठीक है, गिरा वो प्रिंस
गिरा, ठीक है।
और उसके बाद ही हैड टू सर्वाइव।
वो रोल होके
across the world. And like I mentioned that I made use of those cactuses and the uprooted trees I somehow could make my way across the river. Now across the river was another village. और ये जो गांव था, जब मैं यहाँ पर पहुँचा तो मुझे समझ में आया कि अब ये मेरा राज्य नहीं है, और क्योंकि ये मेरा राज्य नहीं है तो यहाँ मुझे कोई भी जानता नहीं है, कोई भी पहचानता नहीं है। और अगर किसी को ये पता चला कि मैं उस राज्य का प्रिंस हूँ तो मेरे साथ क्या किया जाएगा? मुझे बंदी बना दिया जाएगा या मुझे मार दिया जाएगा। तो मुझे मरना नहीं था, मुझे बंदी भी नहीं बनना था, क्योंकि मुझे अपनी लाइफ को यहाँ एंड नहीं करना था। तो मैंने सोचा कि मैं क्या करूँ जिससे मैं इस नए राज्य का हिस्सा बन सकूं, क्योंकि कहीं ना कहीं मेरी जो बुक थी, जो मुझे अभी तक सब हेल्प कर रही थी, अब वो मेरे सामने नहीं है। उस बुक का लिखा हुआ सब कुछ खत्म है। यानी जितना कुछ मैंने उस टेक्स्ट बुक से सीखा था, अब शायद वो मेरे इम्प्लीमेंटेशन के लिए नहीं है। अब अगर मुझे सोचना है तो मुझे क्या करना है? मुझे आउट ऑफ द बॉक्स जाना पड़ेगा। मुझे कुछ ऐसा सोचना पड़ेगा जो उस किताब में नहीं लिखा था। यानी मैं एक एजुकेटर नहीं रही, मैं एक स्टूडेंट नहीं हूँ। अब मैं क्या बन गई हूँ या मैं क्या बन गया हूँ? मैं एक स्टूडेंट से मैं कहाँ आ गया हूँ? एक प्रैक्टिकल ग्राउंड में आ गया हूँ। तो मुझे क्या लगाना है? एक आउट ऑफ द बॉक्स थिंकिंग का मुझे यूज़ करना है। बहुत सोचा और मुझे समझ में आया कि मेरी जो स्ट्रेंथ है वो क्या है कि मैं एक वाइज मैन हूँ, मैं एक वाइज प्रिंस हूँ। बिकॉज आई एम नॉट अ वॉरियर, बिकॉज आई कैन नॉट मेक पीपल लाफ, बट वॉट कैन आई डू? आई कैन यूज माई माइंड। सो आई थॉट, व्हाई इज द रिवर लाइक दिस? इतनी डेड बॉडीज इस रिवर में क्यों है? इतने अपरूटेड ट्रीज यहाँ क्यों है? क्योंकि रिवर क्या है? रिवर क्या है? रिवर मतलब रिसोर्सेज। रिवर इन रिसोर्सेज का खजाना है, और यहाँ क्या हो रहा है? इन रिसोर्सेज को खत्म किया जा रहा है। तो क्या कारण हो सकता है? और मैंने सोचा, जब मैंने सोचा और मुझे ये समझ में आया कि मुझे अब अपना भेष बदल करके और इनमें से एक हिस्सा बनना है, तो मैंने अपने जितने भी मेरी फाइनरीज थी सब कुछ हटाया, उसे मैंने बहा दिया, और एक सिंपल पर्सन की तरह मैं अब आगे छुपता छुपाता बढ़ रही। मैंने कुछ लोगों की बातें सुनी। जब मैंने उस ग्रुप की बातें सुनी तो मुझे समझ में आया कि दे वर टॉकिंग अबाउट सम राइवलरी, और वो कह रहे थे मार देंगे, काट देंगे, कोई यहाँ आकर तो देखिए। मुझे समझ में आया कुछ ना कुछ एनमिटी यहाँ पर है। अब मुझे इसकी और गहराई में जाना था। सो व्हाट आई वांटेड टू डू वाज, आई वांटेड टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाई दिस एनिमोसिटी, ये क्यों हो रहा है। और धीरे धीरे मुझे ये समझ में आया कि ये झगड़ा क्यों है, क्योंकि यहाँ के दो बड़े जमींदार थे, और जमींदार की एक जमींदार का बेटा जो है उसने दूसरे जमींदार की बेटी को भगाकर शादी कर ली, और तब से क्या शुरू हुआ है? इनमें दोनों में स्ट्रगल, दंगल, झगड़ा। क्योंकि पहले वाला जो जमींदार है वो अपने बेटे की शादी कहीं और कराना चाहता था, और इन्होंने भागकर शादी कर ली दूसरे के साथ। तो शुरू होता है झगड़ा, और इस झगड़े में अब क्या हो रहा है? इस सेक्ट के लोग इधर वाले लोगों से झगड़ा कर रहे हैं, मार काट मची हुई है, और रिसोर्सेज का एक्सप्लॉयटेशन हो रहा है, और इसीलिए ये सारी डेड बॉडीज और सब जो है वो कहाँ मिल रही है? हमें नदी में। तो प्रोडक्टिविटी जो है लोगों की वो तो खत्म हो गई है, और किस में इन्वॉल्व हो गए हैं? एक ऐसे झगड़े में जिसका एंड समझ में नहीं आ रहा। अब क्योंकि मैं इस चीज़ की गहराई तक पहुँच चुका हूँ, मुझे कहीं ना कहीं ये भी समझ में आ रहा है कि अगर मुझे इस गांव में रहना है तो मेरे को क्या करना है, मुझे इस झगड़े को पैसिफाई करना पड़ेगा। इसके लिए मुझे क्या रोल अपनाना पड़ेगा, रोल ऑफ समथिंग लाइक अ सेज, रोल ऑफ अ मीडिएटर। तो मैं अपना रूप बदलकर या भेष बदल करके और एक जमींदार के घर में पहुंचता हूँ और मैं उनको कहता हूँ कि मुझे कोई भी काम दे दीजिए, क्योंकि मेरी एक स्ट्रॉन्ग बिल्ड है। वो मुझसे पूछते हैं कि तुम किस तरह का काम कर सकते हो, पर्सन जॉब फिट। तो मैं कहता हूँ मैं आपके घोड़ों की देखभाल कर सकती हूँ, मुझे अपने अस्तबल में, अपने स्टेबल में मैं आपके घोड़ों की देखभाल कर सकती हूँ। तो कहते हैं ठीक है, आप यहाँ रहो और हम आपको खाना पीना जो है वो यहीं पर आपको मिलेगा, घोड़ों की सेवा। जब मैं घोड़ों की सेवा करता हूँ तो मैं ये भी देखता हूँ कि जिस लड़के ने उस लड़की से शादी करी है वो उसे बहुत प्यार करता है और बहुत अच्छे से रखता है। तो मुझे ये समझ में आता है कि वो लड़की इस घर में खुश है, क्योंकि वो लड़की या राजकुमारी जो भी है वो इस घर में खुश है। तो कहीं ना कहीं मुझे ये लगता है कि अब मुझे क्या करना चाहिए, मुझे दूसरे जमींदार के पास जाना चाहिए। तो मैं कुछ दिन की इधर से 2-3 दिन की छुट्टी लेकर और मैं उधर जाता हूँ और मैं वहाँ भी यही करता हूँ। मैं वहाँ पर कहता हूँ कि मुझे मेरे लायक कोई काम दे दीजिए, घोड़े उनके यहाँ भी हैं। तो वो मुझे अपने अस्तबल में जगह दे देते हैं। आई कीप एन आई देयर। और मुझे समझ में आता है कि सिर्फ मिसकम्युनिकेशन एक ऐसा रीज़न है जिसकी वजह से टिफ है। उन्हें ये भी नहीं पता कि ये लड़का कैसा है जो मेरी बेटी को भगाकर ले गया है। सिर्फ झगड़ा किस बात का है कि वो कैसे मेरी बेटी को भगाकर ले गया। तो मुझे ये समझ में आता है कि अगर ये मिसकम्युनिकेशन को मैं हटा दूँ, रिमूव दिस मिसकम्युनिकेशन, तो कहीं ना कहीं क्या हो सकता है, ये झगड़ा सॉल्व। तो मैं उनको बोलता हूँ, दूसरे बेटी जिसकी जो जमींदार के यहाँ मैं गया हूँ, कि आप मेरे साथ चलिए और आप भी भेष बदल करके चलिए, मेरे मामा जी बनकर चलिए। और मैं और मेरे मामा जी जो हैं पहले वाले जमींदार के घर में हम आते हैं और मैं उनको कहता हूँ कि आप 2 दिन देखिए कि आपकी बेटी यहाँ खुश है या नहीं है। जब वो देखते हैं तो उन्हें पता लगता है कि बेटी तो मेरी बहुत खुश है। तो मैं उनसे पूछता हूँ, अगर आप खुद अपनी बेटी के लिए एक लड़का ढूंढते तो उसमें क्या क्या क्वालिटीज़ होती? वो कुछ क्वालिटीज़ को लिस्ट डाउन करते हैं। एंड देन आई टेल हिम, इफ यू कंपेयर द क्वालिटीज, व्हाट इज इट दैट इज मिसिंग इन दिस बॉय? वो कहते हैं कुछ भी नहीं, शायद मैं इतना अच्छा लड़का को खुद भी ढूंढ नहीं पाता। तो कहीं ना कहीं मैं क्या कर पा रहा हूँ, मैं इन्फ्लुएंस कर रहा हूँ। और जब वो खुश होते हैं कि मेरी बेटी शायद सही जगह है, तो मैं कहती हूँ कि क्या आप तैयार हैं उन्हें ये बताने के लिए कि मैं इस जगह का जमींदार हूँ और मैं खुश हूँ कि मेरी बेटी एक अच्छे घर में आ गई। जैसे ही मैं दूसरे वालों को उनको लेकर गया हूँ जहाँ पे, और पहले वाले जमींदार को पता चलता है तो वो सबसे पहले क्या निकालते हैं, अपनी तलवार, कि आज ही काट देंगे, मार देंगे। तो मैं उन्हें समझाता हूँ कि रुकिए, उनकी बात सुनिए। वो खुश हैं, वो खुश हैं कि उनकी बेटी आपके घर में आई और वो ये प्रॉमिस करना चाहते हैं कि ये मारकाट अब आगे नहीं। ऐसा होते ही जब दोनों जमींदारों में सुलह हो जाती है तो अब वो क्या हो जाते हैं, भाई भाई। और मुझे और मेरे बिहेवियर से वो बहुत खुश होते हैं और वो कहते हैं कि आपको तो हम हमारे यहाँ पर एज अ कंसल्टेंट ही रखेंगे, आपने हमारी इतनी परेशानियों को दूर किया है। और क्योंकि अब वो झगड़ों से परे हो गए हैं, नाउ दे आर नो लॉन्गर फाइटिंग ओवर द सेम सेट ऑफ रिसोर्सेज, देयर प्रोडक्टिविटी हैज एनहांस्ड सो मच। इस सभी झगड़ों से ऊपर उठ करके और अब पीसफुल लिविंग हो गई है वहाँ, वो नई चीज़ें करना चाहते हैं और आपस में भी मिल करके काम करते हैं। तो जो हमारा फर्स्ट प्रिंस है जिसको मैं रिप्रेजेंट करती हूँ वो यहाँ पर हमने किया है। अब क्या होता है कि जो इधर वाले जमींदार हैं इनकी एक बेटी है जिनके यहाँ मैं पहली बार गया और वो मुझे कहते हैं कि अगर आप बुरा ना माने तो मैं क्या चाहूँगा कि आप मेरी बेटी से शादी करें। और जैसे ही मेरी शादी उनके साथ फिक्स होती है तो ये वाला जो पूरा किंगडम है ये भी किससे मिल जाता है मुझे। तो एक जॉइंट वेंचर हमने बनाया है जिसमें हमें ग्रोथ मिली है कि एक राज्य मेरे पास था और अब एक दूसरा राज्य भी मुझे मिल गया। Can we continue this story a little further now in anticipation? Can I take this forward? अब 2 साल मेरे हो गए हैं। जब 2 साल हो जाते हैं तो मैं जमींदार जी को कहता हूँ कि मेरा राज्य एक है जो मुझे बुला रहा है, अगर आप बुरा ना माने तो मैं अपनी दुल्हन को लेकर क्या वहाँ जा सकता हूँ, कितने टाइम तक घर जमाई में बना सकता हूँ। तो वो मुझे सब गाजे बाजे बैंड बाजा के साथ में और रवाना कर देते हैं। जब मैं अपने राज्य में पहुँचता हूँ तो मुझे पता चलता है कि मेरे भाई जो हैं तीनों वो कहाँ हैं, वो अब इस राज्य का हिस्सा नहीं। और मुझे ये समझ में आता है कि एक डायरेक्शन में मैं गया था, दूसरे में मेरा दूसरा भाई, तीसरे में मेरा तीसरा भाई और चौथे में मेरा चौथा भाई। और मुझे ये समझ में आता है कि उन्होंने भी एज अ वॉरियर यूज लेकर के और वहाँ के ईवल जो था उसे खत्म किया है। मेरे तीसरे भाई ने जिसके पास में सब योग या जो कल्याण शक्ति थी उसके पास में पूरे संसार को भला करने की, वो वहाँ पर एक तरह से उन्होंने अपनी भलाई को, अपनी योगा को, अपनी अच्छी गुड लाइफस्टाइल को सब में रिप्रेजेंट कर दिया है, सब में फैला दिया है। और अब वो एक तरह के पतंजलि बने हुए हैं कि वो कह रहे हैं कि भाई हम जो हैं हमने एक अच्छी लाइफस्टाइल बनाई है और एलोपैथी का सहारा मत लीजिए, आप तो आयुर्वेद पे आयुर्वेद में वो जो हम आपको प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं। तो मेरे तीसरे भाई ने भी वो चीज़ कर ली है। और मेरा जो चौथा भाई था जो सबको खुश रखने की कोशिश करता था, उसने क्या किया है, वो जिस राज्य में पहुंचा है तो वहाँ उसे दिखता है कि एक प्रिंसेस है जो कभी हंसी नहीं है। तो मुझे वहाँ के लोग पकड़ के कहते हैं कि अगर आपने इस प्रिंसेस को हंसा दिया तो ये राज्य आपका, और अगर आप इस प्रिंसेस को हंसा नहीं पाए तो आपका गला। और क्योंकि मेरे भाई में भी वो क्वालिटी है तो हम क्या कर पाते हैं, वो हंसा पाते हैं। तो जब 2 साल बाद में हम वापस अपने घर आते हैं सभी लोग, तो हमारे पास एक राज्य की बजाय अब 5 राज्य, एक हमारा, 3 हमने बनाया और एक पतंजलि में हमने कॉर्पोरेट एम्पायर अपना खड़ा कर लिया। तो ऑल इज वेल दैट एंड्स वेल। दिस इज वेयर द स्टोरी ऑफ वाइस प्रिंस स्टार्ट्स टू एंड। Sorry.
Okay, let's look at what is the nature of the prince.
What is the nature?
Decode the symbols of the prince.
Yes, because he is wise. So what we have thought is, हमने इसे relate किया with the story of Pandavas. जैसे पांडव हैं, तो पांडव में जो सबसे बड़ा भाई है युधिष्ठिर, so he symbolized this wisdom. He used his mind. And he was not doing things which were unethical. He was always as a consultant. So, युधिष्ठिर जो है हमारे हिसाब से वो रिप्रेजेंट करता है। When we talked about the second brother, so we thought that he represents Bhim, the warrior prince. When we talked about Nakul Sehdev, so we could figure out that they were actually the ones who were taking care, जिनके पास में वो पोषण, लोशन सारी चीज़ें हैं, क्योंकि उनके फादर से उन्हें वो चीज़ मिली है। एंड व्हेन वी टॉक्ड अबाउट द फोर्थ प्रिंस, सो वी थॉट इट वाज मोर लाइक अर्जुन, क्योंकि जैसे अर्जुन है तो रूप बदल कर कृष्ण और अर्जुन को हमने एक साथ कंबाइन किया और हमने ये माना है कि उनमें रूप बदलने की शक्ति है। तो वो एज सिचुएशन स्पेसिफिक अपने आप को थोड़ा सा चेंज करके मोल्ड करके टेक इट। एंड व्हाट वी आर सेइंग इज, देखिए किंग तो हमेशा युधिष्ठिर ही रहेंगे, जो वाइज मैन है So he will always be the king. क्योंकि वॉरियर तो सेनापति है और जो जो हंसाता है सब लोगों को वो किंग से ज़्यादा ही विल बी लाइक अ हीलर. और जो हीलर है उसका तो काम ही है कि सबको दुख दर्दों से दूर रखे. तो किंग तो जो बनेगा वो वाइज है वो. दिस इज व्हाट हार्ट इज.
So the question which you asked,
Yes.
what are the qualities of the prince? So the qualities of the prince are that he is a very emotional person. He knows what to do, when to do, how to do. He is getting his vibes even from a non-living object, a small doll. The smile on the face of that doll can even bring emotions to you, right? He has creativity, which is very must in the king. He is thinking out of the box. आपने बोला कि वाइस प्रिंस की आप क्वालिटीज को जॉट डाउन कीजिए, तो मैं वो प्रिंस की क्वालिटीज आपको
लगता है कि आप अपने बोल रहे हैं.
That is very befitting.
अच्छा, let's look at decode the actual what is the meaning of Prince One. See, the Prince One Prince is the firstborn. But firstborn people are very similar. They are a lot more responsible. They are the role models for the younger siblings. Now this prince is the heir of the kingdom. He is the heir of the kingdom, and the first child generally reflects dependency. He is a good son, a dependent son. Prince One represents the tradition of the system and acquires a voice of an intellectual. He is the wise prince. The prince does not use his experience. See, when you are in the other land, you are still playing the same role of a problem solver. You have not used your experience for anything. He is dependent on other systems and knowledge. First prince is largely dependent on knowledge. He does not connect knowledge to reality through this experience. नहीं, ये आपकी जो स्टोरी है वो आपने प्रॉब्लम तो सॉल्व कर दिया. The prince does not experience his own life himself, but in the process, after thinking about the doll, what is a doll? Doll is nothing but representing yourself, the emotional aspect of yourself. But in the first story, you have not expressed any emotions. Even getting married to the girl, there is no romance. You have been approached and offered a girl, but girl के साथ बात होती है, ना कुछ होता है, ना interaction होता है, there is no romance, there is no nothing, there are no emotions, just शादी हो गई. Or you have not seen, there are 8 frameworks to this story. One is an environment. You are crossing, all the 4 princes are at the crossroad and a threshold together. Threshold because you are entering a new space. A new space requires new role definitions. Then there is a sense of performance. There is a sense of taking new initiatives, meeting new people. So people you have met in this world, you have met the Jamindar, you have met these 2 Jamindars, and you've seen the problem and solved the problem. But your own issue, your own emotions, you have not really looked at yourself. You only looked at the outside problem, other people's problems, and solved them. So you have played the same role as you were playing in your kingdom, and not a new role in the kingdom. And even when you were offered a new role of a romantic hero, there was no romance. There was no emotional description of the girl you were meeting, etc., etc. And if you look at even the first part of your journey, nobody in a crisis has so much time to stand in the bank and stare कि अब मैं क्या करूं. You have to take an instant decision to that you finally went into the water is what happened, but you jump into the water and the lock comes your way. That's what the stories are. Most stories that as he jumps into the water, a log passes by, so he catches onto the log and he floats to the other side of the river, and there whatever happens. So you, in a crisis, the soldiers are there, the sun is setting, it is going to go down in few minutes, you are contemplating अब मैं क्या करूं. So you sit down by the wayside like a tapasvi कि अब मैं क्या करूं. You have to take an instant decision. So crisis management would be, as a manager, crisis management would be a difficult issue for you, because this is crisis management. You have to take a decision, plunge into the water and float. Your role hasn't changed, your new role definitions hasn't emerged. See, when you are going to come across the new NEP, since this is education, you have to redefine your role, and you have to learn you have to use new methodology, and you will not have time to think through and research through. You have to respond to the situation. You have to make tough choices of all kinds. You do not have the luxury of solving people's problems in a systematic, you have to really depend on your guts and your intuition to take decisions. The doll is your emotion. You take inspiration from her, then we don't know, the doll is lost. So if the doll is lost, therefore the self is lost and only the role remains. The story finally concludes that your role remains the way it is, a good, kind, obedient, conforming, compliant, generous, kind, helpful son, and a helpful heir apparent role. But taking new initiatives, you expanded your kingdom by the marriage, but you haven't fought through, you haven't worked through, you have been just got it because of your marriage compliance. So the whole issue is your new role definitions have to emerge. If the new role definitions won't emerge, the institution will fall back on its old ways of doing things, old modalities of doing things, because unless you redefine role, institutions don't change. But the story is very good. Story is good. Conflict resolution is through dialogue, through understanding, through research work, through espionage, through ये सब है. So there is no conflict and there is a positive resolution. साथ में bride भी मिल जाती है, पर bride से बात ही नहीं होती, वो कैसी है वो भी नहीं मालूम, सुंदर है कैसी है वो भी नहीं पता. You have no romance, you have no time for yourself. अरेंज मैरिज में कुछ तो इमोशंस होते हैं ना, इंक्वायरी तो होती है ना, कैसी होगी क्या होगा. No, you can give a lot of reasons, but the reality is this, that your emotions are, huh?
That was just on a lighter note.
Huh. But your emotions are, see, if we have time before 6, we'll do another exercise, which is a leadership exercise in 5 minutes. I'll do it for you.